what qualifies a territory as a revolutionary site, and why is Utah, United States of America, a revolutionary site?
Can I add just a little thing on the top of that?
If that's okay with you, Greg.
Just actually, because that's a question I had too. But in addition, if you do, determine what is a revolutionary site, I mean, would you advocate that revolutionaries kind of flock to that area, almost like Mormons converted, came from Europe to here to create a Mormon? I mean, would you advocate and go into certain sites, or again, just trying to turn every site into a revolutionary site, but in the way that you're talking about, rather than just buying fair trade coffee?
Yeah. So I mean, without getting too much into Badiou, although I'll lay my cards on the table. You always hear me say I'm a Marxist-Leninist Maoist. There's a little caveat, which is I believe Badiou is the next step in revolutionary theory, and so I identify myself as a Badiouist. So here's the thing about revolutionary sites. He makes this distinction between a site belonging and a site being included, and some situationists might actually find this be sympathetic in some ways to this. A site that belongs is just a part of it. It's part of the set. The example, which I find actually really obscure, but he uses it, right, is in France you have a family, and this family belongs to France. It's included in France, right, which is to say it belongs, it's directly part of the people of France, and it's out and about. But there's something interesting about this family, which is they're a bunch of illegals. And so they only exist as a family. Otherwise, they flock away, they are in hiding, right? So what happens is when you do he calls it the count, something belongs to site, right, this family, but they're not represented, right? All the elements of that family disappear when you look for the French people, right? Because they're not included, they're not represented in this other count, right? Classes are represented, nationalities are represented, right? States are represented, but these singular elements are not, right? And this is the term he uses. Okay, so this is a long theoretical thing, but eventual sites, or revolutionary sites, are those things on the edge of the void. They are those things that are uniquely deterministic. What does an eventual site look like? It looks like the Bolshevik Party. What is special about the Bolshevik Party? Were they particularly popular? No, absolutely not. Were they the driving force of the Russian revolutionary movement? No, that would be the Mensheviks. Did the workers love them? They were more sympathetic. Did the peasants love them? No, not even a little bit. But, and this is the interesting thing, is they form this edge of the revolutionary movement in Russia. They are radical. They do not belong anywhere. They are not represented anywhere. And so rather than just being another organization among all other organizations, they become the revolutionary site simply by the fact of their being on this edge. Now, here's one of the key things about the revolutionary site. There's no guarantee, or the eventual site, that there's going to be an event there. And if you hitch your wagon to an eventual site, you should know that it could collapse. Right? May 68 is a good example. That was an eventual site that collapsed. And it took everyone with it that really, in a substantive way, tied themselves to it. So this is sort of the notion of eventual site. What makes Utah a revolutionary site? This is going to sound glib, and this is going to sound stupid. The thing that makes Utah a revolutionary site is the Revolutionary Students' Union. It is the Mormon worker. It is the self-declared sites that are constantly on the edge of disappearing, of being swallowed by the void, where we have a power of destabilizing the entire set. Where does the Mormon, I hope, this is my understanding of it. This is almost certainly an inaccurate understanding of it, and you can be deeply offended, well, but I do have respect for you. Where does the Mormon worker fit in Mormonism? Right? It is It belongs to Mormonism, but it's not included, it's not represented, it's not a part in this very precise sense. And so the very radicality of the Mormon worker, right, makes it an eventual site. It threatens to destabilize the totality of everything else there and generate an entirely new situation, right? I mean, this is what an event is. This is what a revolution is. So what makes us an eventual site is that we have an eventual site. I mean, I'm a materialist. There's no way to determine it beforehand. The only way we know is by doing it, by being here, by creating it, by making it, by fighting it, by handing out flyers, by talking, by doing television spots, by putting up a website. And there's no guarantee that, one, it'll ever turn into a revolutionary site. I'm posing that it is. And if it goes down, just like May 68, or should we be so lucky, I go down with it. And so does everyone who genuinely believes in it. But this is the essence of political risk that Americans have become so desensitized to. You need to risk something for it to matter. And so that's why I believe this is a revolutionary site. As for flocking to it, that would depend on the status of the site.
You're not really thinking as much in geographic. I was initially thinking, when you're talking about sites, as that being a geographic thing, but now you define it differently.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is the interesting feature. It can be both. It could be geographic, it could be intellectual, it could be conceptual, it could be ideological, it could be religious. And so it would vary from site to site, right? Obviously, all the people who are interested in reforming Mormonism cannot flock to the Mormon worker, right? Because some of them are not Mormon and are in fact anti-Mormon, right? They would not belong in that site. And I had a very traumatic for me, in a very self-indulgent way, experience when I went to Nepal, which was me flocking to the revolutionary site of Nepal. And they said, we appreciate, and in retrospect, if I were a good Leninist at the time, I would already know this. They said, we appreciate your enthusiasm, but this is our struggle, and this isn't something that we have to do on our own. And the reason why is because it was a struggle for national liberation, right, against American and Indian imperialism. So, because of the very nature of that site, I could not be a part of it. Now, what determines this? Again, I'm a materialist. You don't know until you're confronted with the situation. So, that may be unsatisfactory, but you may not agree, but does that satisfactorily answer both of your questions? Okay. Yeah.